Welcome to Newsday Studios. I'm Joye Brown, and we are here for a one-on-one conversation with Republican Senate candidate Mike Sapraicone, who's running against incumbent Democrat Kirsten Gillibrand. Now, we'd wanted a debate between the two of them, but Senator Gillibrand did not accept our invitation, even though we offered several dates for a debate. Welcome, Mr. Sapraicone, and thank you for coming in.
Well, thanks, Joy. Great to be here.
But before we get started, let's get a snapshot of your background. You are 68 years old. You live in Glen Head. You're a retired NYPD detective, and you run a private security firm, which I think you've sold at one point, yes?
I did. I've moved to North Hills, by the way, just recently.
All right. So now we're in North Hills.
Right.
The other thing here is that you are trying to be the first Republican New York senator since Alphonse D'Amato.
Seems like a long time ago.
Well, it was. He left us in, well, he didn't leave us. He's still here.
Still
He's
around.
87 years old, but he was defeated in 1998. So it has been a while.
I am. It's been 26 years, I believe, and I'm looking forward to it. This is a great opportunity, I think, for me and a great opportunity for the state to see a little bit of bipartisan politics here, where we can have not just one party ruling this state, but we can have two different people from two different parties talking about what the people's needs are.
Okay.
I think that's important.
Well, I think that you're going to hear that from some of the people that we talked to as well. But first, let's begin with an issue that's become one of the hottest topics of this presidential election. Constance from Manhasset asks, what is your plan to secure our border?
So I was just down at the southern border about a month ago. I went down to Yuma, Arizona, and I think whenever you go someplace, before you talk about something, you should at least understand it a little better and go there. So what the problem is, we have no plan now. I mean, we had book laws on the books before the 94 executive orders were changed back in 2021. So we need to get back down to basics, and I always find that if you start at the bottom and work your way up. So we need to secure the borders properly. We need to stop looking at situations where everybody's application is for asylum. There's rules to what asylum needs to be, and we need to adhere to those rules, okay? It can't just be, asylum isn't just because I want to come to this country. There has to be a reason for it. So right now, people are applying for asylum and parole through an app, an actual app down at the border that I saw that I couldn't believe, where you don't even have to cross the border. So the numbers have come down since April to where people now apply on this app, and they come across the border any way they want in a plane or whatever, and they go to the city of their choice. And they wait there for 5 to 7 to 8 years until they are able to get some kind of hearing. So first of all, we need to hire more judges so we don't wait 5, 6, 7 years, because by the time you can't even find the people anymore at that point. It's not like people are waiting around for you to call them. They're going to move on and do whatever they need to do. So I think that's important. We need more Border Patrol. That's important. As I speak to the sheriffs down there in the Border Patrol, they need help. The volume was so overwhelming, they constantly need help. And you can't vet everybody appropriately if you don't have the right manpower. I think that's really important. But I think what's really important, and it came out about 2 weeks ago, I think we have over 14,000 convicted murderers who have come into this country, and over, I think, 15,000 convicted sex abuse. Rape and sex abuse.
You're talking about the ICE figures that came out?
Correct. They came out about 2 or 3 weeks ago.
They came out 2 or 3 weeks ago. I did not see where they had gotten it down to murderers and, and rapists.
They broke it down to both.
To, what was it, 13,000 criminals.
No, they broke it down to both.
Okay.
And I think it's somewhere, now those are convicted criminals, and not necessarily convicted in this country, but convicted wherever they come from. So I think overall, you talk about 600 criminals that have actually either are awaiting sentencing or have been sentencing that are now in this country illegally. So, people are talking about we should deport everybody. Well, that's not...
Well, let's talk about that.
Yeah.
What is your stance on Donald Trump's idea of mass deportations?
Well, I don't think it's realistic. But I think what certainly is realistic is that we deport the criminals first. We start there, and we deport the criminals. We look at the crimes, and they're the people that should be deported. We don't want to deport good people. Listen, we're all immigrants at some point. But this is not a humanitarianism situation that people are saying it is. My opponent is talking about, let's reimagine ICE. Well, we should be reimagining what's going on in the state of New York, what's going on in the country. That's what we should reimagine. And she's saying that, listen, ICE is only there to hurt people and not help people. I don't understand if people realize we have a national situation here. We have criminals coming into this country that we're not even tracking or know where they are. we don't want to. We want people to come to this country, but the legal way. It's not humanitarianism when people are sleeping on sidewalks and people sleeping in bus depots. We're not helping them by doing that.
So you want to redo the whole kit in the book and caboodle in terms of getting into the country, following people once they're in the country.
I don't want to redo everything. There are laws that need to be reenacted again, and we need to follow. Laws are important, okay, and we need to follow them. We need to put people in here safely. We need to have our citizens safe, not criminals coming across our borders. I mean, the age that some people are coming are of fighting age, of military age. What happened in Israel on the 7th last year could very easily happen here. And I don't think we're paying attention to that much.
Well, okay. Well, let's keep with this for a little bit. Now, this question comes from Newsday's political team. So you're talking a lot about immigration, but what do you say to opponents who blame your party for not passing the comprehensive immigration reform package earlier this year that included some of the things you were just talking about, such as more people and more law enforcement people at the border?
So I think something I'm learning as a new person in this particular role, when we see these legislations and we see bills come out, the other party seems to highlight, and both parties probably do, they highlight what they want you to see. So I spoke to sheriffs on the border, down on the southern border. There were only 2 sheriffs who thought it was a good deal. Everybody else thought it was a terrible deal. In some of these bills, they throw things that they threw Israel into it, they threw Ukraine into it, they threw about everything they could in the package, and then they push it as this is a bipartisan way to change the border. How about bringing the border back to the rules and the laws we had prior to these executive orders? How about starting with that? Now, I know they're going to say, well, it was the Republicans who helped write this bill. Okay, so every Republican isn't doing everything the right way, and every Democrat isn't. We need to work together, but we need to stop telling people, oh, this was bad to do because it was only for this. It wasn't only for this. It had a lot more things in that bill.
Absolutely. And that's the way it goes. Everything is larded up.
Right, certainly. And, it talked about 5,000 people a day coming into the country. Well, 5,000 people a day times up by 365, okay? It's a massive number.
So you want to toss that out and start again?
I do want to start again. I think we have to start again realistically with what's the best thing for the people here in the United States of America.
All right. Well, let's move on and talk about the Israel-Hamas war. Tens of thousands of people have died, and the conflict has been expanding, with Iran firing missiles into Israel. The fighting's been going on now for more than a year. What's your stance on the war, and what approach would you support to end the violence and to bring hostages? We do have a Long Islander there.
We do.
Home.
Young man from my boy Plainview.
Yes.
I was just at the memorial ceremonies on the 7th here. So again, I don't think I can talk about things that I'm not really familiar with. So I went to Israel a month ago, and I spent 4 days. I spent a few days on the Gaza border. I was able to see Gaza. I stood in a kibbutz where they were destroyed and burnt out, and the missiles dropped. People were burned and executed and tortured. I stood there. I was able to go to the Nova Festival and actually see. Now, I'm a homicide detective from the city for years. I was able to over 350 people massacred and brutally abused and burnt. It was terrible to see the memorial there. I was also able to go the next day. I went up to the northern border, on the Lebanon border. And I haven't worn a bulletproof vest or a helmet in many, many years. And we were told, listen, when you hear the sirens come up here in the northern border, the missiles have already struck because we're so close to Lebanon. And you could see Lebanon right across from where we were standing. And I was in a town that had 26,000 residents prior to October 6th, the day before. And now it's down to 3,000. They were all relocated to the south of Israel. But we went with an armored escort. We went with the regional head of the police. We went with the head of the IDF there. And we toured for about an hour, and we saw the missiles and the shrapnel and the homes burnt and destroyed, and people would come back on weekends. But 30 minutes after we left there, and they said it was a quiet day, 30 minutes after we left there, they dropped 14 missiles on the site we were at, which was pretty scary.
Well, so what did you take away from that in terms of what you would do policy-wise as a senator?
How do we not support Israel? Israel is not fighting just for Israel. Well, what do you think? We're not next? We're not next on the radar that Iran is going to come here and do something. They're building they're increasing their nuclear power. They're preparing it. We're looked at we're looked at as a weak place right now. I think after Afghanistan, we've seen that the world looks at us as a weaker place, a good target to work on. And I think Israel is just an opportunity for America to be next. And I think we need to support our allies. They're our strongest allies by far in the Mideast. We need to support them. We need to stand 100% behind. Listen, war is terrible. We don't want to ever see anybody killed. And I don't want to use the term, it's a casualty of war, people dying. That's terrible that has to happen, but it is. And we need to stay strong. We need to support them. And we're talking about a ceasefire. Hamas broke that ceasefire on October 7th of 2023. Israel didn't break the ceasefire.
Well, let's just stay with foreign affairs for a second, but let's move to a different arena.
Okay.
Fighting between Ukraine and Russia has been going on for 2 years now, with the U.S. and its allies sending weapons and money to Ukraine. Where do you stand on continuing assistance to Ukraine?
I think we need to continue assistance, again, to show our strength. Everybody turns to America. We're the people that every nation in this world turns to for support and for strength, and we need to be strong. You know, people say, well, if Trump was the president, would that war have happened? Well, I can't answer that, and nobody can answer that, but I can say when he was the president, we didn't have wars going on that we have now, okay? So that's important. I mean, I think the vice president went over there to try to work everything out between Ukraine and Russia prior to that war, and then a few weeks later, all of a sudden, the war began. So we need to show our strength. We need to, and I'm not saying that everybody should fear us, but everybody should understand that we're here to keep the world peace, and that's what America's always done, and that's what America will always do.
All right. So many of our readers, and we're coming back home on this one,
okay,
are also asking about the issue of abortion. Would you support a nationwide ban?
Definitely not. Definitely not. I'm pro-life. I wouldn't support a ban. I don't think that's a realistic thing either that will ever happen. I think it belongs where it is, right here in the States.
Now, you say right here in the States. So you think that each state should do its own, or would you prefer to go back? Well, tell you what, let me ask this a different way. Following the Supreme Court's ruling that overturned Roe v. Wade, President Biden floated the idea of expanding the number of justices on the High Court, imposing term limits, and setting up a code of conduct. Before we get to that, let's go back to abortion for a second. Would you like to see the Congress go back and reinforce Roe v. Wade? You say you don't want a nationwide ban. Would you vote the other way?
I think it should be in the states. I think it's where it belongs. I wouldn't be in favor of bringing it back to the federal government's decision. I would put it in the states' hands. I mean, I think that's where it belongs. I think the states should make that decision. The people should vote on that as a state issue. I think that's important.
So no vote for a ban and no vote for restoration of Roe v. Wade.
Correct.
Okay. So now let's get to the Supreme Court
this is crazy.
and the proposals on reforming that court.
Right. So first off, let me just say that I think when our founding fathers created the Supreme Court, you know, as I become this politician, people say that I am now becoming, you know, everybody kind of leans towards their base. You want to make your base get out there and vote for you, and you want to campaign against somebody. Could you imagine having the Supreme Court campaigning, okay, to be elected? I think it would be a terrible thing. I think it would be ridiculous. I don't think that's the purpose of the Supreme Court. They shouldn't have to go out there and campaign.
But I don't think I'm not aware that anybody's saying that they should.
Well,
campaign.
if they have a term limit, okay, if you have an election, if you have a term, you know, several terms, maybe you can run for 2 terms, whatever they're going to come up with. You have to campaign at some point.
Well,
oh, you do. You do. You have to campaign. I know my wife's a Supreme Court justice.
Yes, I know.
I know she's not allowed to say anything, and it bothers her sometimes.
Right.
But she has to be a judge, okay, and she has to be impartial. I don't think you can run without having to say something. But more important than that, I think, what's really important, and I look at what my opponent said the other day. So she was asked this question, and she said, well, no, I think we should increase the court. I'm not sure. I have to pay attention. I have to read a little more. And then she said, well, maybe if we increased it to 12 might be a good number, but I have to research a little more. Well, I'm a local school board guy. I was the president of the school board in Seaford for several years, and on that board, you have odd numbers on boards for a purpose. We have a tie right now in the United States Senate, correct? And so we have a a vice president of the United States, who is the president of the Senate, to be the tie-breaking person. So you can't have 12 people on the Supreme Court. It gets me crazy to think that you're the United States Senator for 15 years and you say something like, well, maybe we should have 12 people on the court. I'll think about that.
Well, while we're still in the court, let's keep it rolling here. Another question from our political team related to the Supreme Court. That court issued a ruling this year that strengthens presidential immunity to the point where it makes it extremely difficult to prosecute a president, Democrat or Republican, for what they called core official acts, even after they've left office. There's been talk of congressional legislation that potentially could blunt that ruling. Where do you stand on this?
It's a Supreme Court ruling. I think it will be challenged every time this is a situation, okay, that comes up. I think we will keep seeing that go back and back and back. If that's their ruling, I'm okay with their ruling because it works for both sides. It works for whoever wins the presidency come November and whoever wins the presidency come November 28 and 32 and on and on and on. That's part of our democracy. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that.
All right, let's come even closer to home and talk about, you were among many Republicans who attended a big event at Nassau Coliseum. You made an appearance at Donald Trump's rally. How important was it for you to be a part of that?
I think it's very important. I mean, he's our Republican candidate. We need to stand strong with him. We may not always agree on everything that he has to say, but I can agree that I think we were in a better place 3.5 years ago, economy-wise and everything else-wise, than we are today. Okay, it was very important to be there. I think it was great that he was here on Long Island. I think it was a great thing for Long Island. Listen, I've lived in Long Island the last 33 years, okay? And it's great for Long Island. Long Island is a great place. And I think you're going to find that Long Island's going to support President Trump. I mean, we were able to turn Nassau and Suffolk red over the course of the last several elections, right?
Well, a lot of the conversation there had to do with the saying that maybe New York State could go red. And, I kind of get it because Republicans flipped 5 House seats. And, Lee Zeldin came within a few points of Governor Kathy Hochul in that government in the race for governor, I should say. Do you think that all of New York, I mean, realistically, do you think New York is going red?
Well, I don't know if the whole state will go red. Listen, I'm a Queens kid. Okay, I grew up in the boroughs. I patrolled the streets of the 5 boroughs for 20 years. I'd like to say that I have a really good shot of turning the boroughs red, but I am a little realistic. I think if I work really hard, as we've been working, I've got a good shot in the boroughs because I'm just a kid from Queens. Long Island has done a great job. I mean, look what we've done with Blakeman and Romaine, and we've done with Donnelly and Tierney. Okay, those are important things. I think what helped turn the counties, the Nassau and Suffolk County red, was bail. And I know we're not talking about bail right now, so I'll leave that be. But I think the bail reform was a big deal because people on Long Island have common sense.
Well, let's talk about bail reform for a second. Now, politically it's called cashless bail, but you're actually using bail reform, which would seem to imply that you know what that was supposed to be doing.
Well, don't imply that right away. Okay, let's see until I answer. But what's important is, as a police officer, we believe bail. We don't believe there should be bail for everybody.
Right.
Otherwise, we wouldn't have enough prisons, okay, or facilities. I think it's important, but I think it has to be done fairly. I think we didn't do it fairly here when Cuomo enacted that, when he put that in. I think we didn't talk to the police professionals. We didn't talk to the district attorneys. We didn't talk to the police commissioners or the sheriffs. I think we left that out. And I think when you talk about bail and law enforcement, how do you leave? Those are the main players in the game. And people have a tendency, as I talk to people around this state, they think that the police and the sheriffs make the rules and make the laws. They're missing out sometimes. They don't understand that their voice in November, any November, is so important to elect the right people to make sure that bail reform is handled the right way, make sure that the laws are handled the right way. And I think that's absent from a lot of people. People trust government, that government will do everything the right way all the time. Well, government doesn't do everything the right way all the time. And that's why we need change. We need common sense. We need people who care about the people that elect them. And I think that's such an important thing. I think it's important that the constituents that elect you, that you understand what their needs are and you respect them. They're the ones who put you in office. And I see some commercials going around about, I'm not about politics, I'm about the people. Well, as I travel these 62 counties, and I've been everywhere for the last 6-8 months, if you're about the people, you should maybe meet the people. Maybe go to a fair, maybe go to an event, maybe shake someone's hand, maybe not just fly in and fly out 10 minutes later, okay? The people elect you. I'm a big talker. I could talk here with you for 6 hours, okay? But I like to listen too, and I learned to listen, basically on the school board and as a cop. And people need to listen to the elected officials need to listen to the people who elect them.
All right, well, let me ask you this. Since you're bringing up that Gillibrand, you'd like to see her out and about more. How would you be as a senator? I mean, Alphonse D'Amato, people call him Senator Pothole.
But they still do.
They still do. But I once heard somebody said that for Long Island, he brought home the eggs, the bacon, and the hash browns too. So how do you see yourself as a senator?
So first of all, I'm not saying me as an opponent would like to see my opponent out there more, but me as a constituent would like to see my senators out there more.
Right.
And Schumer and I might disagree, but Schumer's everywhere,
right.
Okay? Might give the same speech the same day and change the name of the college, but he's everywhere. They said Moynihan, right? That was the other senator, I believe, with D'Amato, right? They said if you turned to policy, you would go to Daniel Moynihan for that. But if you needed something done and bring home the bacon or bring home those potholes fixed, you went to Alphonse D'Amato. And that's the kind of senator I want to be.
Okay.
You need to do what the people ask you to do. You can't fix every problem, but you can certainly listen to everyone's problem and maybe work together to solve how to get ahead with those problems. I want to talk to people. I want to be there. I want to shake hands. I want to sit down and have a cup of coffee with you. And I want to understand what's your problem. Because if I don't understand your problem, how do I help you? I mean, I have my own problems, okay? But how do I help you solve your problems and make this a better state?
All right. Well, let's turn to a different topic here. There's a lot of concern about voter fraud and the fairness of the election. Do you believe this election can and will be carried out fairly?
I think so, I'm sure. I think there's been voter fraud for many, many, many elections over the course of our history, right? I think it will be fair. I think it will be fair, and we will accept that it's fair. I think everybody needs to do better things. We need to make sure that the polls are done right. We need to make sure that people who have passed away are not voting.
Right,
I think that's a big deal. I think this is a big problem for me. I think we need to have identification to go vote. I would be very supportive to see that everybody who's a legal citizen in this country has identification when they go to the polls to vote. I think that's important. I think you need to be a legal citizen in this country to vote. I think that's fair. People who pay their taxes have that right. I think we should maintain that. I think that's a big deal.
Well, look, just a quick follow-up. Will you vote to certify the results of the presidential election no matter who wins?
100%.
Okay. All right. Let's move on. You kind of hit at this a little earlier, so now we're here.
Right.
The political rhetoric in this election has reached new heights. Many Long Islanders want that to change.
What are we going to do to lower the temperature in the world of politics? Because it's unacceptable. Grown adults acting more for themselves rather than for the people and the children that we're raising.
Right. Not an easy answer. But we have to be, people have to get along. People say, I remember growing up, and we've talked about earlier, we're basically in the same ballpark age-wise, and I grew up in Queens, in the city, and people didn't say, so what are you? What? What are you? I'm an American. No. Are you a Democrat? Are you a Republican? No one ever asked me that when I was growing up and living in this city. Now I can't say hello to you or say, hi, I'm Mike Sapraicone, I'm running for, what are you? And, well, I'm a Republican. Oh, I can't talk to you. I don't have time to talk to you. Or I'm a Republican. Oh, you're the only guy I want to talk to. It's ridiculous. We're people. And that's a cop thing with me. I'm going to help everybody, no matter what you are, who you are, what color, what religion, where you live. It's my job. That's what I got sworn in to do. We should just get along better. I know it's easier said than done, but we need to, people have said to me, oh, you're a Republican. Oh, I'm not voting for you. And I'll say, well, wait 1 second. A lot of people don't like anybody at the top of the ticket. And I think that's a fair thing for me to say. There's a lot of people who are not happy with either part of the ticket, right? So I say, okay, let's take the next step. You don't even know me and you won't even talk to me. Give me 2 minutes to talk to you a little bit about who I am, what I've done, and what my vision is for this country. And then I'll go into my line, because I'm this cop guy, and I'll say, you know, my opponent, do you know who my opponent is? Yeah, that guy. It's not that guy. Well, what's his name? It's a young lady. And I say, young lady, it's not, because younger than I am, it's not, that's not who it is. It's Kirsten Gillibrand. Oh, yeah, I think I've heard of her. I said, well, you know, as a cop, if you put her in a lineup, you can't pick her out. No one's picked her out in 15 years. And they'll laugh, but then they'll let me talk to them a little bit about what I've done, my career, my experience as a police officer, having a small business, you know, what I've done with that for over 30 years, and about how I feel about people and things. And they'll laugh at me. They'll take one of my pens or whatever I'm giving out, okay? And they'll laugh, and I'll say, well, do I have a shot here? Well, we're certainly going to look you up. You certainly have a shot. That's a big deal. That's a big deal, because we're all Americans. We're all New Yorkers. We all want the same stuff. We want our homes to be safe. We want to walk down the street and be okay. We want to see our kids get a great education, be able to stay here in this state, get a job that they can advance in. That's what we want. We want to see our economy come back. Everybody, no matter what affiliation you are, feels the same way about that. And if you can bring that to the people understand.
Well, let's move to a different subject here. Former President Trump was targeted in 2 confirmed assassination plots this year. One was in Pennsylvania, where he was rushed off stage at a campaign event. The other at a golf course in Florida. In those cases, assault-style rifles were recovered by authorities. Do you support the idea of an assault weapons ban?
Not necessarily. I think you have to, you know, assault weapons have a big classification, okay? I think it has to be looked at what it is. Now, everybody says, well, you're a former cop. You know, you have to, do you support guns? Do you not support guns? Well, I support the Second Amendment. But I think there's, you know, when you talk assault weapons, it's a big category. We need to look at it. Guns don't kill, people kill, okay? And that's important. We need to make sure that there's proper laws that you can get a gun. I do believe in background checks. I think that's very, very important. I do believe we should look at the red flag laws, and those should be done the right way. We should make sure that weapons are in people's hands that we can trust with them.
Right.
I think that's important.
And the red flag laws are the laws that say that if there's a concern about someone with a gun,
right,
then officials can go and do something about that.
I think the law says it's a year.
Yeah.
I think, well, you know, I don't know if I'm like, yeah, it's got to be a year. But I think, you know, it needs to be reviewed. It needs to be done the right way. There are situations where doctors have said this person's not capable of doing this. And, you know, one doctor's opinion isn't necessarily the world, you know, that's correct. So I think those things need to be looked at. And I'm really a true believer in common sense in every single thing we do. How do we not just sit down and think about it for 1 second? Now, on the street, as a cop, sometimes you didn't have that second. But when you got that second to think about what you were going to do and how you were going to handle a situation, 9 times out of 10, it came out the right way.
Then let's talk about another situation.
Okay.
When we went to the public to ask what they were worried about, one issue came up over and over again.
It's painful to go to the grocery store. I'm
That's
serious.
true. Yes.
My pockets are hurting. I don't make a bad salary.
Yeah.
But with everything that's going on, you're struggling. Everyone is struggling.
We're also hearing the same complaints about housing, rent prices. What does the federal government need to do to help Long Islanders on those fronts?
Well, I think we need to hold the state accountable for some of the things they do. The state is sending $5 billion, Governor Hochul is sending $5 billion down to get illegal immigrants debit cards, to pay for their educations, to pay for their housing. Listen, I understand her. I don't understand. I don't agree with what she's doing. We have homeless people all over this state. We have veterans who have no jobs and are living in the street. We need to take care of our own people. You know, you go into the store and everybody's talking about the economy and cost of living. I'm sure that when we sit down at Thanksgiving dinner this year, that dinner is certainly going to cost more than it cost 4 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago. And those are things people care about. People are concerned. I worked 3 jobs as a cop. And so I worked the midnight tour as a cop, and I worked at Nobody Beats the Wiz. You remember Nobody Beats the Wiz? So I worked at Nobody Beats the Wiz in Long Island. Matter of fact, I opened many of those stores out here. And I went and I worked there prior when I came home from work. Then I went home and helped my wife take care of the kids as she worked part-time or full-time, whatever the situation was. And then I went out and I delivered Chinese food in Flushing before I went back to work that night on my midnight tour. I had 5 children, like 3 at the time and then 2 more later on. And you want to work hard to maintain that your kids can go to the right schools and they can get the right education, get the right clothing and everything they need. And it's hard. People are struggling. People shouldn't have to struggle that hard.
Well, speaking of struggling, here's something else that's on a lot of Long Islanders' minds. They're frustrated over the SALT cap that limits how much of our very high state and local taxes can be written off on our federal income tax. Republicans and Democrats have been pushing to repeal that cap. What would you do differently to finally get that done?
It has to be repealed. And I think, you talked about the rally at the Coliseum. Mm-hmm. The president came out, and President Trump came out and said he knows he should repeal. That's going to die, I guess. It dies in April, I think.
Right.
But I think we need to do strong. I mean, it doesn't just it affects Long Island. It affects other states. It affects California. Right. It affects Pennsylvania. There's a lot of states it affects. And again, it's about a plan. I think sometimes we just do things because we're pandering to that side. I think it's important to put a plan together that helps bring this economy back around. And that's not what we don't do that well. We make a decision and then we say, oh, wow, maybe that wasn't the right thing to do, but I'm going to stand behind this now. We need to think a little bit better and be a little more thoughtful in the things we do.
Let me ask you something. At the rally at the Coliseum, now, you know that President Trump actually signed that cap in,
yep.
And he made a point of saying that he had changed his mind. Did you guys have anything to do with that?
I personally did not.
Okay.
But I wouldn't say that our congressional delegation from Long Island probably didn't, because they're strong supporters in bringing SALT back.
Okay. Let's move on. Lots of Long Islanders depend on tips to make ends meet. Both presidential candidates have floated the idea of eliminating the tax on tips. Steve from East Setauket isn't sold on that idea. He writes, "It seems to me that would open the door to businesses converting all commissioned salespeople to be paid in tips, which would lead to those same businesses avoiding payroll taxes." Now, you're a businessman.
I was for 33 years.
Absolutely so. Tips, what do you think?
I think it's a good idea. I was a busboy when I was back in high school in Queens for a long time. I think it's a good idea. It helps. I think it helps people. But again, we just can't say, okay, tips are going to be, no tax on tips, and that's the way it is. We need to look at what the domino effect is, and we don't do that well. What will that do? How do we support it that it will be fair, that people will be able to get tips, but how do we keep businesses, small businesses, from making this into a bigger thing than it is? I mean, look at my opponent also says she wants minimum wage. She's fighting for minimum wage, to be increased, and we're fighting for, I'm drawing a blank here for a second, but about Family Care Acts, mm-hmm. right? As a business owner, okay, when you start looking at that, I mean, in California, I had a company in California, when COVID happened, we had to pay every employee 2 weeks COVID. It didn't matter if you had COVID, but if your brother's, cousin's, sister's aunt had COVID and you said you had to go spend a day with them, we had to give you 15 days to go spend with them. We're not even thinking about how that destroys small businesses. That doesn't pick up the economy. That doesn't grow the economy. Minimum wage, I spoke to farmers up in Broome County, okay, dairy farms, and they have to pay minimum wage, then time and a half after the 8 hours, double time after so many hours. So that sounds great for the worker, and it is great for the worker, but look at the employer. How does the employer do that? You're going to go out of business paying that kind of money. Pennsylvania, for instance, there is no, I'm not sure if there's a minimum wage, but there's no limit to, like, after 40 hours, you have to get this. And after 46 hours, you have to get that. Or after 12 hours a day, you have to get double time. So people want to leave the farms in Broome County and Yates County and walk a couple of miles into Pennsylvania where they don't have those restrictions. And they can work 80 hours if you want. Now, I'm not saying working 80 hours is the way we should do things. I worked 80 hours. I did okay, and my family did okay. But we're handing people things that are making other people harder for other people to make a living.
All right.
We're hurting small business.
Right. Well, I don't think we want to do that since small businesses account for the biggest
right.
part of our economy.
That's
But
right.
let's move on. Long Island has one of, if not, and you've made some allusion to this earlier, Long Island has one of, if not the largest number of veterans of many regions in the United States. Lydia from North Belmore asks, why do we need groups like Wounded Warriors or Tunnel to Towers to provide assistance to veterans? When will the federal government fulfill its obligation to care for disabled veterans?
Well, it's always great to have those groups, and I actually walked the tunnel and the Tunnel to Towers walk a few weeks ago. I'm also the senior trustee on the Museum of American Armor in Old Bethpage, and our greatest generation is just about gone, right? And listen, it's important. You should always have those groups to help, but they shouldn't be the main factor. It's our responsibility. We sent our men and women into battle, or we had our men and women enlist or were drafted, whatever case it might be, to serve this country. It's our responsibility to help them and do whatever we can as a government to do that. And I think, I think we need to cut the fat in a lot of different places. So people say, well, how do you get that money? Will you steal from this one to put that one? We need to reevaluate some of the ways that we waste our money.
All right, well, let's talk a little bit more about this one.
Okay.
Okay, now a conservative group has come out with something called Project 2025. All right. In the policy document, there's a provision that could reduce services and benefits for veterans on Long Island. And that's part, by the way, of cost savings. And this document, I read all 922 pages.
God bless you.
And part of it wants to be to save money, shrink government and everything, but it would seem to potentially have some very real impact on veterans here on Long Island. Have you read the plan? Are you aware of any of this?
I have not read the plan. I have no intention of reading the plan. I don't think it's a realistic thing. I don't think anybody, other than the other party, seems to think it's happening, okay?
Well, the Heritage Foundation is, they're big movers and shakers here.
Well, there's a lot of foundations that are big movers and shakers, okay? So we can't, I'm not saying write them off, but I'm saying we just can't go by every mover and shaker that says what's going to happen, okay? Listen, veterans, we can never take away from our veterans.
Okay.
That's important. I feel bad. I fund, actually, an educational program at the Museum of American Armor because we don't even teach in our schools. And I've gone to the Board of Regents to discuss this. And we don't even talk about World War I, World War II, the Holocaust. Kids don't even know that. If you ask a kid about this or that, 9 times out of 10, they have no idea what you're talking about. We've lost history in our schools and in our classrooms, and we need to bring that back. We need to educate our children on what's happened, on our history, okay, and what's moving along in our country. And I think that's so important that we educate our children and we teach the right things in school. Listen, history is history, be it if you like it or don't like it. Now, I'm the chairman of the Columbus Day Parade. I marched yesterday in Manhattan. I've been the co-chair of that for years and years. And history is history. If you forget about history and try to change it, what do we have to live for? What do we learn? What do we understand? Not all history is good, but you need to know the bad history as well as the good history. But we need to keep it. We need to stand behind that.
Well, let's talk for a minute about some recent history here.
Okay.
We've had seen some devastating storms hit North Carolina and Florida. And over the summer, some parts of Long Island got more than 9 inches of rain in a day. Some roads on the North Shore communities were washed out. Suffolk County Executive Ed Romaine suggested climate change was responsible. Let me ask you this. What can or should the federal government be doing to help Long Island communities, not just people on the shore, but people who live up on the North Shore in the bluffs, where the parts of the bluffs are falling out there? What can be done in terms of storms, rising tides, and communities here on Long Island that are reeling from that, and it's not going to change anytime soon?
I think the Corps of Army Engineers, I think they do a great job, and I think we need to support them and make sure the federal government funds them enough for the Long Island situations, just like in North Carolina and everywhere else. I'm not an expert on, I'm not an expert on weather change, okay? But I think we see something's going on. We need to decide how to deal with it the best way and a realistic way, okay? And I think we need to support that federally. I think the federal government always needs to support the states. I think that's important. You look at all the money we pay in taxes in New York State, and how much do we really see come back from that from the federal government? Very small portion considering what we pay. I think that's important. And it's certainly important to preserve our shores, be it on the North Shore, the South Shore, further out eastern Long Island, or wherever. I think that's important. The Corps of Army Engineers should be certainly supported. I think they do a great job. I've seen them work on the dunes out in the Hamptons. And, I think we have to learn to do things the right way. And again, I'm going to go back to this a million times. I think sometimes we just jump into something. You do it for the sake of saying, well, my party might like that, or my constituents might like that. Let's look at the whole situation. And let's not cause a domino effect and make something worse by not doing it the right way.
Let me ask you this. Have you considered yourself up on the Hill? What committees? Now, as a freshman, you're not going to get the pick of the litter there, but what committees would you be interested? What topics would you be interested in?
I'm a cop guy. I think Homeland Security I think that's in my wheelhouse. I think that's important. I don't know what choice I would get with anything, but I would think, though being the junior senator from the great state of New York, I think I would be somewhat of a good position, right? But I think certainly Homeland Security would be something I'd want to be part of. I think that's important, and I would build off of that and see what fits me. I think I bring a lot of experience to the table most places, but I wouldn't want to be that type of guy who goes and says, I should be on this, I should be on this, I should be on this. I'll let my resume go in front of me, and I'll talk to people and try to understand people. I look forward to being the senator on November 6th because I want to sit down and I want to say to Schumer, I want to say, okay, now I'm the new guy in town. I might be the junior senator, but I'm the senator. We're in the same place here, okay? You're not the majority leader anymore, and that's probably the way that will turn out, okay?
Well, we'll see. We'll
see. But I'm going to say, hey, we're both the two senators from New York State, and the leader from the House and the governor. You might all be of a different affiliation than I am, but guess what, guys? We're all New Yorkers. We all need to sit down and talk about what's best for this state. And if you don't do that, you're failing. We're failing the people who elected us. And I really look forward to that. I mean, that's important. If we're not going to talk, we're not going to get anything done here.
Right. Well, Mr. Sapraicone, thank you for coming in and sitting down with us. Now, Newsday reporters are going to be taking a close look at this conversation. To read the story, just go to newsday.com. I'm Joye Brown.